Hey guys, Saiyan here, bringing you another Dragon Ball Z Dokkan battle video. And so, as we get closer to the release of Beast Gohan and Orange Piccolo, a lot of people have been doing, I keep wanting to call them end-of-year tier lists, but obviously they're all pre-Gohan and Piccolo end-of-year tier lists, because obviously technically with them seemingly releasing on the 28th, I'm not sure when this video is going to go up, but they've started tweeting out the letters that are presumably going to spell out Beast, which that timing, along with what we already assumed based on last year's date for the Dual Dokkan Fest, it should be the 28th, right? So that means that technically Gohan and Piccolo are going to be out for what, like 3 or 4 days of this year? So it's not technically an end-of-year tier list, but it's basically close enough, right? It's too long to say, like, before Beast Gohan and Orange Piccolo, at least in the title for a video, so I don't know how exactly I'm going to title this, but I've talked about it in the past when I've done tier lists. I don't do tier lists all that often. I started doing some more regular ones a little while ago, but with the release schedule, I feel like doing them too often. Realistically, the lists only change like when one really big unit comes out, right? Which, depending on the release schedule over the end of this year, it's been a bit slow. So like if we get a new unit come out and they're not even in the top 10, then what's the point of even doing a new tier list, right? So I thought the end of the year would be a good chance to do one. Plus I saw a bunch of people, like I say, posting their own tier lists, and some of them I just for me personally, I just could not understand some of the logic behind some of the placements. So, funnily enough, the video idea started from the idea for the thumbnail, which you guys will have obviously seen when you clicked on the video. I'll put it up on the screen here quickly as well. I had this idea for like a meme thumbnail after I saw a bunch of the tier lists that other people had posted. But then, of course, you know, if I have to actually make a video to go along with it. So this is going to be the tier list, the top 10 units. Now, obviously, this is for global specifically, because as I've said many times in the past, whilst I do obviously check out the showcases that my JP creator friends put up, I don't play JP, I play global. I don't like to rate units that I've not used. People can argue all day long about how much you can determine a unit's value from just calculating their stats and everything. But for me personally, I have to use them in the game to get a good idea of where I would rank them against other units, because I've definitely had examples in the past of units that surprised me one way or the other, right, better or worse, when I actually got to use them based on how I thought they were going to be. So that's why when I do these kind of lists, they are only for global. So as always with these lists, I've said this in previous tier list videos, I know everybody loves to roast each other's lists on Twitter and stuff like that. I'm perfectly fine with people disagreeing. Let me know why you disagree, how you would do the list differently and stuff like that. But just be civil about it. I mean, you know, it's not that difficult, right? We all have different opinions. I feel like I'm going to give at least what I think are reasonable explanations in the video. So if you don't agree, that's cool. Let me know why. We can always have a discussion about it, but just be cool about it, basically. So we're starting off with number 10, obviously, which is a brand new release for global, the LR Fusion Zamasu. So I have been very, very impressed with this unit. Now, I should say straight away, this is basing all the units as if they were rainbow. I don't take into account how good a unit is at 55% when doing these kind of lists. This is with the unit at rainbow, even if my experience with playing with them is only with like 1 or 2 dupes or something like that. I've obviously, you know, like I said previously, for units I haven't used, I've seen the showcases, I've used Rainbow Friends and stuff like that, right? So this is assuming all units are Rainbow. So this Zamasu just came out on Global. Very, very impressed with how good he is. His biggest drawback, and the reason why I couldn't put him any higher, is the fact that, you know, whilst he is on a 200% team, all of his good partners and the units you want to run him with don't have a 200% leader skill. And when it comes to the overall running of this unit, when I've used him in various red zone stages and things like that, one thing I have noticed that can be a little bit of an issue is he gets extra ki per ki sphere obtained for 5 turns. Once those 5 turns run out, if you're not running key supports with him in slot 3, then if you get a bad field of orbs, then it can be difficult to get his 18 key super. And one of the things that does make him so good is when you get your 18 key super, you get a guaranteed additional. And he greatly raises defense on both supers. So he's not a slot 1 unit, but after he's got his supers off, his defense can be pretty good. Once you've got those dupes, full additional is the way to go. If you get a triple super turn, then his defense is actually looking really, really good. So when we get a full 200% team for all the Goku Black and Zamasu units, I could potentially see this guy moving a little bit higher. But there are some, issues with his kit. Now, that might seem a little bit of a weird point, the leader skill, when we move on to the unit that I have at number 9, which is the Easy A Goku Black and Zamasu. Now, they do not get a 200% leader, even on the main team that you would run them with Fusion Zamasu. But one of the perks that they have is obviously for the first couple of turns, they are a slot 1 unit. You don't have to put them in slot 1, but you can. But obviously, if you go into a big red zone boss and you don't have any slot 1 units on the turn, you can't really put Fusion Zamasu in slot 1. I mean, you can and cross your fingers, but you could be in for a bad time. Whereas these guys can be very, very good in slot 1. The reason why I wouldn't put them any higher is from my experience of using them so far, and you guys have seen the videos that I've been putting out over the last week or so, they benefit quite a lot from support. So on the turns where they have support, we're seeing them put out 12 million attack stats, and that's with what I would call a realistic team. I've seen much higher attack stats when people are running extra support units, using things like the B-Pan active skill or Bardock and Guinea active skill on the previous turn, which, some of those builds are just not realistic for the most difficult content. But even in teams that can actually beat red zone stages, they're hitting 10, 11, 12 million attack stats, which is pretty crazy. The 15% heal at the start of the turn is pretty wild as well when you consider that we're running teams that have 700k HP, so 15% is a pretty huge amount of health to just get for free at the start of the turn. So these guys are very, very good. Their combination with Fusion Zamasu is obviously very good as well. So I don't think I could put them any higher, but maybe it is a little bit of recency bias. But these two units on Global, I think at the moment are very, very good and worthy of being in the top 10. So then we move on to number 8, and I know this one is probably where people are going to start to get annoyed, and this is the LR Super Saiyan 4s. Now, when the Super Saiyan 4s and the Gods came out, I was one of the people who preferred the Super Saiyan 4s. Partially, I guess, just because I'm biased. I like Super Saiyan 4 as a form more than I like the God forms. Even though I'm not a huge fan of GT, I just really like the Super Saiyan 4 form. Obviously, I like the, once we transform into Gogeta, we get the damage reduction, we get the super attack counter chance. Bit annoying that gets disabled against enemies that disable dodge, but there's still not a huge amount of them in the game at the moment, so it's not really the end of the world. And this unit does have some of my favourite animations, although I'm not really taking those into account at all for this list, right? It's just based on performance. So the Super Saiyan 4s, very, very good. Unfortunately, the gap has started to widen between them and the Gods because their team is just not getting buffs. They hurt a lot of the teams that you could run them on with the fact that they don't have prepared for battle and they have shocking speed instead. So, for example, they get the 200% leader skill from Vegeta and Trunks, but obviously Vegeta and Trunks are a prepared for battle unit. A lot of the really good units on their team are prepared for battle units, so it can be very difficult for this unit to fit in. I feel like they would have aged a lot better if literally they just had changed shocking speed for prepared for battle. But, I guess we'll see. One big thing that we could get with this celebration, of course, is physical Piccolo, or I don't know why I said physical Piccolo, orange Piccolo. I think he's going to be physical, just because it'd be funny, right? Gamma 1 and 2 were STR and AGL. Orange Piccolo should be on Fused Fighters. He's obviously not going to be on Kamehameha, but if he comes out and he's like a godly slot 1 tank, that's going to be a huge buff for the Super Saiyan 4 team, but obviously, they don't have that really good slot 1 unit. Now, often when I debate with people about unit ratings and placements and stuff, I like to rate units kind of in a vacuum. So, the Gods and the Super Saiyan 4s were always level for me because they basically are the same unit. And a lot of other people will take into account everything like teams, team build, the teams you can run them on, their links, all that stuff. And so that's why a lot of people feel like the gap between the Gods and the Super Saiyan 4s is getting a lot bigger. So for this video, I decided I've put one unit in between them based on those same kind of arguments, and that is the LR Metal Cooler. Now, in a vacuum, again, I could probably easily see Gogeta or the Fours above Metal Cooler. A lot of these units are the ones that are next to each other. I could easily see arguments for them being switched. But I really like Metal Cooler. I'm a huge fan. I was lucky enough to get mine Rainbow during the Worldwide Celebration. So I was talking about it with people on Twitter recently. I don't understand the argument of people that think he's not a good slot 1 unit. I think he is. I've beaten all the red zone stages with his team, with him in slot 1. So he's a very, very good unit. He's like an auto run on Cooler's team. And this is the... I showed this list to Minato to get a little bit of feedback before I went ahead and recorded the video. And the reason I would put Metal Cooler in between the Gods and the Super Saiyan 4s, because spoiler alert, the Gods are next, right? The reason why I would put him in between them is I think he is really good. At his best, he's kind of close to their level, right? Like on his best turn, fully built up, he's doing like 11 million attack while tanking, and he has that revive available. But the main reason why I would put him above the 4s on this list is because he's like an auto run on Cooler's team if you have him. Whereas, like, what team are you building that you're just automatically including these guys, apart from their own team? Largely because of the links and stuff, right? Like, if I'm making a Vegeta and Trunks team, unless I'm taking on, like, an int boss, I probably am not auto-including these guys on the team, right? Whereas if I'm making a Wicked Bloodline or just an STR Cooler team, this guy's going on there straight away. So that's the reason why I would put him above the 4s, okay? So then we have the Gods. I still think this unit is insanely good. Like, obviously, I have them at number 6. But I've seen a lot of these lists recently that inspired making this video of people putting them at, like, 3 or even 2, which I think is kind of crazy, especially because a lot of people argue that they've been pushed off of their own team. On JP anyway, with how crazy the Movie Heroes team can be. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but I still think this unit is very, very good. The one thing you have to remember is when we start getting into these difficult red zone bosses, unless you're getting, like, you know, triple supers in their first couple of turns, as you get towards the final stages against the harder hitting bosses, Metal Cooler Core, like AoE Broly, they're not taking double-digit damage from normal attacks unless you transform them. And obviously, if you transform, they stop stacking. But I have noticed the more I've played these harder stages with them, I don't really have much of a problem with transforming them basically as soon as possible. Because not only do they have that dodge chance, which they get more of with the Rainbow Orbs, because they massively raise their defense on their 18 key, and then if you get enough key, they do another super that greatly raises their defense. And then, of course, you have the potential for the hidden potential as well. This means that they will tank normal attacks from basically all bosses, even Cell Max, for double-digit damage once they've gotten their super attacks off. So their only real drawback defensively is that they die to a super attack, which a lot of units are in that same boat. You know, if you pick up enough Rainbow Orbs, they have a very high dodge chance, but it's still only a chance to dodge. I was having a discussion with someone on Twitter the other day who thinks that the Gods are better than Vegeta and Trunks, and they were trying to argue to me that the Gods literally cannot get you killed, which is just the clear example of someone not understanding how probability works, right? Because even if you pick up the maximum 5 Rainbow Orbs, you still don't have a 100% chance to dodge. So if you get unlucky, they can get blasted with a super attack and then you die. So this unit is still very, very good. But for me personally, I think having them in the top 3 is a little bit much. But I definitely think they are very good. So next up in the number 5 spot, we have Gamma 2. So it should probably be no surprise that the next slot is Gamma 1. I definitely think these two could be interchangeable if you want to change them around. Gamma 2 is obviously the more offensively based one, and Gamma 1 is more defense based. A lot of people value defense more. I put him a little bit higher just because, firstly, his leader skill is a little bit better. He gives Kid Buu a 200% leader skill, which is pretty cool. Artificial Life Forms, I feel like, is definitely a better combination than Special Pose or Androids. And then, of course, this guy, I feel like Gamma 2, if you only are using one of the two, this is kind of what I base this placement on. If you're using one of the two, they're obviously not going to be as good when they're not next to each other because of their links and stuff. But you could run Gamma 2 as a floater. He's going to get off a bunch of attacks. His defense after supering is really good. So he can hold his own. He'll be able to survive reasonably well. Potentially still dies to a super to these big bosses. But if you're running Gamma 1 by himself, then obviously in those early turns where he's guarding, if you get him fully built up, and then you're running him as potentially a floater, once he gets his super attack off in slot 3, if he is fully built up, like his defense is obviously really, really good. And then he does have the counter for unarmed super attacks. Gamma 2 has the nullification for Ki Blast super attacks. Depending on the boss you're fighting, will again depend which one of those is more valuable. Like I say, I could easily see these two being switched if you want to switch them around, and I would have absolutely no issue with that whatsoever. So, now we move into the top 3, and this is where the most controversy is going to come from. I think a lot of people, unless you're someone who thinks the gods are in the top 3, have the same top 3, just in a different order. So I'm going to go ahead and say straight away that I can see arguments for every single unit in the top 3 being number 1. So if you have the top 3 in a slightly different order, then again, I'm not going to argue. I see arguments for each of them being in that top spot. This is obviously comes down to my personal preference and my experience with the units. So, number 3, we have Carnival Goku, aka Birdku. This unit is incredible. Probably like an auto run on all of his teams. The major drawback that he has is I think his own team sucks. Powerful Comeback does have some good units on it, but just a straight up Powerful Comeback team, I really don't like that team. And of course, running double Carnival Gokus is hugely detrimental because only one of them can revive, which means if you drop below 59% HP, the other one loses their guard, but then doesn't have the revival as a backup, so absolutely can get you killed. Now, again, this unit is incredible, really good link set, fits really well on all of his teams. The reason why I personally put him below Vegeta and Trunks, who you can obviously guess are going to be above him on this list, is because when it comes to taking that first hit of the turn that gives him his defensive buff, if you're going against one of the more difficult bosses, especially like Metal Cooler Core or even say Cell Max, if you put him in slot 1 and the first attack of the turn he takes is a super attack, he can still take a ridiculous amount of damage. And I've seen a lot of people try and counteract that point by saying, oh yeah, but he's got his revive. But remember, the revive doesn't activate unless you are at 59% or less HP. So if you're at like 80, 90, or even 100% HP, and then he gets hit for like 500k in slot 1 for a super attack, you can't get the revive. Or even if he's getting hit for less, right, against some of these harder hitting bosses, if they super attack first and they're doing like 300, 400k, he might not be the one that gets you killed, but him taking that much damage as your slot 1 tank could then lead you to not surviving the turn. So that's the thing about revival skills that have always been a bit hit or miss, is if you're starting the turn above the threshold, then you can just get absolutely destroyed and the revival doesn't go off. But I do think Goku is super good. Like I said, I can see an argument for him being higher, but just in my experience, I think he sits in the number 3 slot. So, number 2 might not surprise people if you've seen my previous tier lists and stuff, but at number 2, I have STR LR Cooler. When these guys both came out, I had Cooler at 1 and Birdku at 2, so this shouldn't be a huge surprise to people. This guy's absolutely insane, especially having him at Rainbow. Like, I got so lucky on his banner. Anyone that tells you that, you know, he's a glass cannon, folds like a piece of paper, like, he's not a slot 1 unit, that's obviously very true, but once you get him built up, on his best turns where he's getting a couple of additionals, it doesn't even have to be like the godly 5 super turn, but on his best turn, especially with the units that you want to run with him, like the STR EZA Cooler, he can hit 1,000,000 defense while putting out all of these ridiculous attacks. So I've always kind of preferred Cooler over Birdcoo, even though if you are someone who values defense much more than offense, and you want to have Carnival Goku over Cooler, I don't, again, I don't see the point in arguing, because I feel like a lot of these placements do just come down to people's personal play style. So if you prefer defense, then you would obviously have Carnival Goku over Cooler. I like the offensive play. I don't think he fits the full definition of a glass cannon, because once you've gotten his supers off, his defense is actually really good. I can't deny that obviously if you get the worst RNG turn where he just does one super, then obviously he can be killed by the harder hitting bosses. But when you run him with his team with supports like that STR Cooler, it's not like he's taking like 100k from normals. It's just the fact that he will obviously get blasted by a super. Units like AGL Broly obviously has type disadvantage, so normal attacks are going to hit him pretty hard if he doesn't get those additionals. But remember, once you get him fully built up, he gets at least one guaranteed additional super straight off the bat. So I've had great experience with this guy. I mean, the first no item run I did against Cell Max for a video was with this guy's team. I think he is ridiculously good. If you don't have him even in the top 3, I feel like that's a mistake. He's just insane. Even if you want to put Carnival Goku above him, I think he's ridiculous. So, very good. Can't wait for us to get LR Golden Frieza on Global to make his team even better. But yeah, I absolutely love this unit. And so, of course, no surprise then that the number 1 unit is Vegeta and Trunks. Now, when it comes to putting him at number 1, Cooler at number 2 and Goku at number 3, I've already considered the fact that people might say, well, why do you have this super defensive god unit at number 1, but then Carnival Goku, who's a defensive unit, you've put under Cooler? And the main difference is kind of what I was trying to say with Carnival Goku, where if he's taking the first hit of the turn, like a lot of the time you put him on the team to be your slot 1 tank, but if he gets super attacked as the first attack, he can still leave you in a bit of a sticky situation. Whereas obviously Cooler, you put him on the team to do Unga Bunga damage, and that's exactly what he does. Whereas when it comes to Vegeta and Trunks, a lot of people don't like the fact that they're quote-unquote locked into slot 1, but you put them on the team to be your slot 1 tank. And people can argue the pros and cons between Carnival Goku and Vegeta and Trunks in my experience of using them both. So again, whilst I was talking about this is kind of based on Rainbow, but my personal experience, I have both of them at 79% level 10 links. So they are equal for me in terms of like hidden potential investment. And I just find that this unit is better defensively than Carnival Goku. Like 9 times out of 10, if not 10, right? If the first attack of the turn they take is a super, they obviously can still take a bit more damage, but they're not relying on getting a huge amount of their defense from getting that first hit, whereas Goku does get a really big buff. Plus, Goku still gets that, like it's essentially like resets every turn, even though he does stack on his 18 key, and so do these guys, but Goku loses that little bit of extra buff and still needs to get hit again, whereas these guys obviously build up by getting hit. So once you've been hit a few times and gotten to that final stage boss, their defense is obviously just going to be more reliable with the guard on top. Now, again, I can see the complaint that people don't like them being locked in slot 1, but I feel like when it comes down to who's the best unit, if we're doing like a top 10 list, one of the complaints that I see is that people don't like the fact that because you have to use them in slot 1, that means if you're running their team, both your rotations have to be them and somebody else, which means you don't get as much creativity in the team building. And I can see that as an argument as to why you think they're not as fun to use, because it gives you a little bit less variation in their team. But for me personally, I don't factor that in. If we're talking about who's the best unit, then I'm not really considering like, oh, they let me make fun team builds. I'm thinking about what is their performance in the game. And remember, these guys came out in a period in the game where Dokkan released a whole bunch of slot 2 units back to back to back, right? With the the Golden Week units like Gohan and Cell. Then we had that Part 2 LR for them that was the LR Goku and Gohan that kind of wanted to be run on Goku and Gohan's team, but they're both slot 2 units. So we got a lot of units that were really good in slot 2, all coming out in the same period. And then this unit came out, And it's like, well, there you go. There's your God of Slot 1 unit. And now, for some reason, people are complaining that they have to go in Slot 1. So, I don't really understand that criticism personally, but there you go. That is my top 10 list. So, here's the actual list. Can I get a better... Which one of my scenes is actually going to show the entire page? Do I actually have one? There you go. We'll use this one. So there you go. You can just about see the full top 10. But there you go. So that is my top 10 units on Global at the end of 2022 before the release of Gohan and Orange Piccolo. Like I said at the beginning, if you do disagree, feel free to let me know why down below in the comment section, but do be civil. I'm more than happy to discuss with people, and potentially after having debates and discussions, I could change my mind. I'm not like married to these positions, especially the lower half. But, you know, if you have some ideas and you have some feedback, let me know down below in the comment section. And let's all look forward to Beast Gohan and Orange Piccolo hopefully coming straight in the top 3. If it's not, you know, hopefully 1 and 2. But I guess we will see when they release. So that is going to be it for the video, guys. This has been the Masked Ningen. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel if you are new. Check out the links down below for the Discord and the merch store. And I will see you all again soon. Have a good one.